1939, Europe was falling. Standing alone against the Nazi war machine was the Royal Air Force. In Part 2, we covered the giants and the lifelines. But today, in Part 1, we meet the warriors that looked the enemy in the eye. From the obsolete biplanes that sank battleships to the wooden wonders that outran jets. This is the complete story of Britain's frontline aircraft. Let's open the archives. We start with the Gloster Gladiator. A relic of a bygone era, it was the RAF's last biplane fighter. Despite being obsolete, it fought heroically in the defense of Malta, facing overwhelming odds against modern Italian bombers. Outgunned and outpaced, it proved that courage matters more than aerodynamics. Its predecessor, the Gloster Gauntlet, already a museum piece by 1939, it could reach 230 mph, once the fastest fighter in the RAF in 1935. Relegated mostly to training duties, it taught the generation of pilots who would later save Britain, a forgotten stepping stone to victory. The legendary Fairey Swordfish. Pilots called it the string bag because it looked like it was held together by string. An open cockpit biplane in a modern war, it seemed suicidal. But it flew so slowly that German anti-aircraft guns often couldn't track it. It achieved the impossible, crippling the Italian fleet at Taranto in a daring night raid. One pilot reportedly landed on water, taxied to the Bismarck, and still managed to take off again. It famously doomed the battleship Bismarck, retiring as a legend. The Fairey Albacore, designed to replace the Swordfish. It offered a closed cockpit but failed to outperform its legendary predecessor. Pilots hated it so much they begged to keep flying the old Swordfish. Ironically, it was retired from service before the string bag it was meant to replace. The Westland Wallace, an ancient general-purpose biplane. In 1936, it made the first ever flight over Everest, then spent the war pulling targets, a quiet veteran of a bygone era, serving far from the glory of the front lines. The Hawker Hurricane, the true unsung backbone of the Battle of Britain. While the Spitfire got the fame, the rugged Hurricane shot down the majority of German bombers in 1940. Built partly of fabric and wood, it was easy to repair. A Hurricane could be repaired with hammer, nails, and Irish linen, and be back in the air in hours. Later, it evolved into a night fighter, hunting in the dark with radar and cannons. Without the Hurricane, the Battle of Britain would have been lost. The icon, the Supermarine Spitfire. Powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin, its roar was the sound of hope. With its elliptical wings, it could turn tighter than almost any enemy fighter. Over 22,000 were built, more than any other Allied fighter. Late models with Griffon engines were nearly 100 mph faster than the originals. More than a machine, it is the enduring symbol of British defiance. The Boulton Paul Defiant, a fighter with a fatal flaw. Armed only with a rear turret, it was defenseless from the front. But in one night in 1941, Defiance shot down 38 German bombers, their finest hour. Forced into the dark, it found redemption as a dedicated night fighter. The Westland Whirlwind, a sleek twin-engine fighter. With 4 cannons in its nose, it packed a devastating punch. However, its twin Peregrine engines were so unreliable that only 116 were ever built. Plagued by these issues, it was a promise unfulfilled. The Bristol Beaufighter, the Whispering Death, a rugged twin-engine fighter that excelled at night fighting and anti-shipping strikes. Deadly versatile, its legend spanned from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The de Havilland Mosquito, the Wooden Wonder. Critics laughed at a wooden bomber until they saw it outrun everything else. Hermann Goering famously said, "It makes me furious when I see the Mosquito. I turn green and yellow with envy." Unarmed, it used speed as armor, marking targets for heavy bombers with pinpoint accuracy. It could drop a bomb through a specific window in Berlin and be gone before the sirens stopped. A stroke of genius born from non-strategic materials. The Hawker Typhoon, a brutal heavyweight, A failure at high altitude, it became a monster at treetop level. Its 24-foot propeller and 4 x-20mm cannons made it sound like an express train with guns. Using rockets, it tore through German armor columns. Its successor, the Hawker Tempest, one of the fastest piston fighters ever built. It was fast enough to chase down and destroy V-1 flying bombs mid-air, a super fighter that arrived to dominate the late war skies. The de Havilland Hornet, a Mosquito on steroids. Smaller and faster, it represented the peak of piston engine performance. It could fly from London to Rome and back on internal fuel alone. Arriving too late for combat, it was the perfect fighter with no war to fight. The Blackburn Skua, a fighter-dive-bomber hybrid. On 10th of April 1940, it sank the German cruiser Königsberg, the first major warship ever sunk by dive bombing. It also scored the first British aerial victory of the war. The Blackburn Rock, a turret fighter at sea. Heavy and slow, it was a failure. Only 136 were built. Pilots called it the flying coffin with a turret, quickly withdrawn to towing targets. The Fairey Fulmar, a two-seat naval fighter. Lacking speed, it relied on endurance. It carried 8 machine guns and could stay airborne for 8 hours, perfect for convoy escort, a reliable stopgap in the Mediterranean. The Fairey Firefly, finally a naval fighter with real teeth. Heavily armed with cannons, it hunted Japanese targets in the Pacific. A powerful late-war striker renowned for its range. The Hawker Sea Hurricane, launched from merchant ships on a one-way ticket to defend convoys, a heroic sacrifice to keep the supply lines open. The Supermarine Spitfire, a Spitfire with a hook, fast and deadly, but its delicate landing gear often snapped on carrier decks. Unforgiving but brilliant in the right hands. The Fairey Barracuda, an ugly duckling torpedo bomber, its wings folded backwards like a switchblade to fit British carriers. Despite its looks, it dive-bombed through hell to cripple the battleship Tirpitz. Next, the Grumman Martlet. This was the British name for the famous American F-4F Wildcat. Compact and rugged, it was vital for the Royal Navy in the Atlantic before Britain could build enough of its own naval fighters. A tough American import that held the line when the British industry was stretched to the limit. The Grumman Hellcat, the big brother of the Wildcat supplied by the US to replace losses. A powerhouse that cleared the skies over the Pacific, it served extensively with the British Pacific Fleet against Japan. Reliable and deadly, and British pilots loved this American machine. The Vought Corsair, famous for its American inverted gull wing design. While the US Navy initially struggled to land it on carriers, British pilots mastered the technique first, proving it could operate from decks. They clipped its wings to fit inside the smaller British hangars, turning an American legend into a British warrior. The Blackburn Firebrand, a massive strike fighter. Arriving too late for combat, it showed the future of heavy naval power, a beast built for a war that ended. The Fairey Battle, a tragic miscalculation. On 14th of May 1940, out of 71 battles sent to attack bridges at Sedan, only 31 came home. Proving too slow and vulnerable, it was quickly withdrawn from combat. The Bristol Blenheim, once the fastest bomber in the world. By 1940, it was outclassed, but brave crews flew them against impossible odds, holding the line when Britain had few options. The Vickers Wellington, the beloved Wimpy. Its unique geodetic structure made it incredibly tough, surviving damage that destroyed others, the backbone of the early night bombing campaign. The Armstrong Whitworth Whitley, the Flying Barn Door. Flying nose down, it was a rugged night raider and paratroop transport, essential in the dark days of the war. The Handley Page Hampton, the Flying Suitcase. Fast but cramped, it served extensively before the heavy bombers took over, a narrow machine for a wide war. The Avro Lancaster, a failure that birthed a legend, plagued by engine fires and mechanical failures. But its airframe was sound, eventually evolving into the mighty Lancaster. The Bristol Buckingham. Arriving too late for bombing, it served as a high-speed courier, a fast plane without a mission. Finally, the Gloster Meteor, the Allies' answer to the jet age, a machine driven not by a propeller, but by a stream of fire. While piston engines screamed for speed, the Meteor broke the barrier effortlessly. On 7 November 1945, a Meteor F3 set the world airspeed record at 606 mph, still with propellers in the sky. It didn't need to win the war. It arrived to bury the past. A tombstone for the propeller age. These were the warriors that fought face to face with the enemy. But an air force is more than just fighters and medium bombers. What about the giants that burned the enemy's industry? What about the lifelines that carried the armies? Watch part 2 immediately to see the Lancasters, the Seaplanes, and the gliders. The link is on your screen now.